As of 2016, there are 18 Pokemon movies with a 19th one on the way, some good and some bad. Today, I'm going to be counting down my top 10 favorite Pokemon movies. Before I begin, I would like to note that the Giratina movie will not be on this list as I have not seen it yet, but I'm sure it's great, I just haven't had a chance to see it, so please don't kill me. This list will only be consisting of the main anime movies, so no Legend of Thunder or Pokemon Origins. And I feel like this goes without saying, but spoiler alert if you have not seen any of these movies. But with that said, let's get started. With the Pokemon games, you would normally expect there to be two versions, but the movies are a different story. The way they handled the dual movies, Pokemon Black Victini and Reshiram and Pokemon White Victini and Zekrom, man that's a mouthful, was a good way to handle it. They showed the white version in theaters and the black version on Cartoon Network later on, which gives you a different experience. Not only that, but the movies themselves were different. They switched up some minor stuff that made it worth it to watch both versions of the movie just to spot the differences. As for the plot, I really liked the interactions between Victini and the gang. Victini made friends with not only Ash, but Silent and Iris as well, which is something we really haven't seen in a Pokemon movie. Not only that, but Victini also interacts with the Pokemon quite a bit. Like for example in the opening battle when Victini powers up Ash's Scraggy, which was pretty funny. Victini was a bit cliche by being that Pokemon that was all fun-loving at first but then had to assume responsibility, kinda like Shaman or Hoopa, but the way they handled it with Victini was done pretty well to a point where it didn't feel cliche. I really liked these movies, but I may be a little biased considering this was my first Pokemon experience in actual movie theaters, but hey, this is supposed to be my opinion, so who really cares? It was the closest I've ever gotten to interacting with other Pokemon fans, and that's something any Pokemon fan can appreciate. I don't know what it is about the Hoenn movies, but they just seem to have a certain charm to them. Each of the Hoenn movies focuses on the bond between people and Pokemon, which only a few other movies before that have actually done. However, the one that I feel does this the best is Destiny Deoxys. Let's start with the setting. LaRue City is so high-tech and I love it. If I could pick any fictional city to live in, this would definitely be in my top 3. It really contributes to one of the many messages of this movie, which is that we shouldn't take technology for granted. As for characters, I found that Tori was a generally lame character. His fear of Pokemon seems a bit irrational considering that you live in a society where these things are littering every street corner. The way that they explained it was that he had a traumatic experience as a child involving Rayquaza and Deoxys, but it doesn't really explain why he's afraid of all Pokemon in general. Plusle and Minun should seem relatively harmless to somebody like Tori, but nope, he sees Rayquaza go insane one time and apparently thinks that all of these things will eat your soul. He has to have seen other Pokemon before to know that they're relatively harmless, so Tori's fear of Pokemon is extremely irrational and it's just there for character development. This fact alone is one of the 2 reasons this movie is so low on the list. The other reason is this movie's theme song, This Side of Paradise. I normally wouldn't mind it, but it is literally the only song that plays during the entire movie. Even right before Rayquaza is getting ready to kill a bunch of people, this song is still playing. No joke. It's fun at first, but it gets real annoying real fast. Anyways, I really like the character development in this movie. The way Tori faces his fear of Pokemon is how many people in real life face their fears, and that really speaks volumes. Ash is really only there to advance the story and save the day in the end, but I like how he wasn't stupidly overpowered in this movie. He was powerful, but he wasn't like the best trainer there. Ash's Hoenn team in general wasn't very powerful aside from Sceptile and Glalie, but that shouldn't take away from how he was presented in this movie. The message of this movie was that nature and technology will always conflict each other. Going back a bit to the city, the fact that it was basically destroyed by Rayquaza and Deoxys' fight, leaving everybody defenseless without their Pokemon, really speaks volumes about society, especially today. We're so attached to our technology nowadays, and we really don't know what to do without it. Like seriously, there are 4-year-old kids out there with iPhones. Like, this is not okay. This needs to stop.
It's time to stop!
This is reflected in how Tori is so neurotic and paranoid in the beginning. He's the definition of somebody with social anxiety, and the fact that he grew up in this technologically advanced society basically represents my generation perfectly. There's been a rise of people with social anxiety since smartphones became the norm, and Destiny Deoxys, despite being released before smartphones were a thing, seems to reflect this perfectly. This got a bit off topic, but I really like the message of this movie. Also, the battle scenes. Those were cool. While this movie does have its flaws, it really made up for them by making it a relatable movie, even for one that came out in 2005. I really enjoy Destiny Deoxys, and I think it's one of the more underrated Pokemon movies out there. Giratina and the Sky Warrior is one of those movies where there's so much going on at the same time that it's hard to pin down exactly what you're supposed to be concerned about. Shaman just seems like it was meant for a bigger role in this movie, especially regarding Giratina and the reverse world, but it was just kind of there for plot reasons. It was used as a battling tool the whole movie, but it did have good development. It went from being a spoiled jerk at the beginning and ended up being more sentimental while still being a little bit snarky. It's a bit of a shame that Shaman wasn't used to its full potential as a character. The appearance of Regigigas looked like there was more to it, but that too went under the bus as Regigigas did literally nothing to help the plot. I like how Giratina was built up to be the antagonist, but it then turned out it was just doing what it needed to do to keep the reverse world safe, as it was revealed that Zero was the real villain. Zero is a villain that you can really feel for. He's like a less extreme Darth Vader in that he thinks he's doing good for his master, in this case Newton, but is really hurting things without realizing what he's doing. When he finally figures everything out, you kind of feel for him. That was essentially thrown out the window when you realize that Zero learned virtually nothing from his mistakes, but hey, there's a reason this movie is so low on the list. This movie is not perfect by any means, with there being gaping plot holes and mostly weak character development, but it is by far one of the coolest Pokemon movies when it comes to setting. The Reverse World had a lot to offer, but it seemed to underdeliver. The Reverse World sequences were very well animated, as well as the fight sequences. There was a lot they could have done there, but what they did do was done pretty well. The real world scenery was beautiful as well. Never have I seen such a scenic location in a Pokemon movie before. It really speaks to the movie's overall message of the power of nature that it has over technology, and it reflects this in the ending song. This is basically wasted potential of the movie, but the reason it's on this list is because it's just plain fun to watch. All in all, Giratina and the Sky Warrior was not a very good movie plot-wise, but it's so beautifully animated that I just love watching it. Also, Pokemon battling on a train. In what universe is that not cool? When it comes to Pokemon movies, there's usually some kind of epic battle for the fate of the world or the city or something, but Pokemon the Movie 3, Spell of the Unown, isn't that. It's not Ash vs Arceus for the fate of the world, it's Ash vs Entei, and it's personal. The whole movie is just Ash's mission to save his mom, and that's the simplicity of it. A lot of Pokemon movies like to overcomplicate things by making it about the world being in danger to give Ash motivation, but in this movie, he just wants to save his mom. Later in the movie, it becomes more about saving Molly from herself, but that brings up another reason I like this movie. The idea of the unknown being controlled by Molly's emotions shows exactly how powerful emotions can be. It's such a relatable message that I'm sure anybody can connect to, especially as somebody my age and as somebody who looks for stuff like this in movies. Sometimes our emotions become powerful and at times hard to control. Sometimes it just makes us want to go into our own world where anything is possible. Drifting away from the message, I also really like the animation in this movie. The CG segments mix with the traditional 2D segments quite well, specifically in the battle between Charizard and Entei. That scene alone is just enough for me to put this movie here. I don't really have much to say about this movie, which is why it's only at number 7, and I can see why it gets all the praise that it gets. It was pretty tough to figure out where to rank this movie because it's the first Pokemon movie that I fully remember watching, but the Rise of Darkrai is really good for Pokemon movie standards. Ash and friends find themselves in Alamos Town, the wrong place at the wrong time. Dialga and Palkia get to fighting for no real reason at all, and it starts to mess with the fabric of space-time itself. In the meantime, Darkrai is terrorizing the city in what people think is an act of wrongdoing, but as we learn later in the movie, he was just trying to warn the citizens of their impending doom. I really like how Ash and friends got caught up in the hysteria of the other trainers before coming to their senses. Just goes to show that Ash is just a regular trainer like anybody else. I also like the idea of Alamos Town fading away, which really added to the race against time tension to save the city. The scene where Darkrai sacrifices himself to buy Ash and Dawn some time is also a really great scene. It revealed to everybody that Darkrai wasn't the bad guy, but rather a radical anti-hero. However, the thing I love most about this movie is the Oraceon scene. The idea that a song could quell the fighting of two Pokemon that are basically gods was really quite something. The song, mixed with the animation, made for one of the best scenes in Pokemon history, and I would be lying if I said I didn't bring a tear to my eye every time I watch it. Hey guys, if you couldn't already tell, this is part 1 of a 2-part video, so next month's Pokemon 20 video is going to be part 2, so if you want to see my numbers 5 to 1 Pokemon movies, then wait next month for that, because that is when that is happening. So, see you at part 2, see you next video, also, I don't know what I'm doing. Bye!
To